The real estate industry is changing in a major way, and more specifically around the way that buyers agents receive their compensation. Now, this topic began to gain traction when a group of sellers filed a class action lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors and a few other big box brokerages around buyers agent compensation. Now, before we go any further, I think it's worth saying that this lawsuit has been going on for some time, but this is just now really being implemented into the industry. So there's a lot of things that myself, attorneys, and the industry as a whole are still learning to navigate. Now, we're doing this in our best way possible in order to serve our buyers and selling clients to the best of our ability, but give us some slack. And as you'll see throughout this video, I do have some notes here with me. I just went through a class about this yesterday, and I want to share with you the best information that I can as quickly as I can, but obviously as time goes on, things may change about this. So give me some slack that I'm trying to bring you the best amount of information as quickly as I can so that we can all evolve here. But with that being said, let's get into it more. So in my opinion, from what I've learned, I believe the real issue that we're truly tackling here is an issue of transparency. I think that due to sellers feeling that they were not adequately informed of how compensation was going to be allocated, they subsequently felt that they were being taken advantage of in a real estate transaction, which if I were not in real estate doing this every day, I can see how that could easily come about and why they could feel like this. A class I recently attended on this topic made two really good points I'd like to share with you. The previous ways that real estate transactions were conducted could lead to concerns of steering and concerns of antitrust law violations. The way that real estate transactions have typically been conducted, in our market at least, led to the seller paying 3% to the listing agent brokerage and 3% to the buyer agent brokerage. It went something like this. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. My name is X Realtor. I would like to work for you and represent you in the sale of your home. In doing so, I require 3% compensation for my services. In addition, it is typical in this market to also offer 3% compensation to the buyer's agent who brings a qualified buyer that closes. I do need to inform you that you are not obligated to provide that specific commission amount. However, if you don't, it is possible that agents might not show your home. I personally would never avoid showing your home due to compensation amounts, but I cannot guarantee you that others won't operate like this. So this previous hypothetical scenario is where things can get a little sticky here. As you heard in that scenario, it kind of alludes that buyers agents might steer a buyer away from your property due to compensation, which in a way forces a seller through fear to pay a full buyer's agent commission. As far as steering goes, after that class I took a look up the definition of steering to see if the situation classified as illegal steering. The definition I found on NAR's site goes as follows. Steering is a practice of influencing a buyer's choice of communities based upon one of the protected characteristics under the Fair Housing Act, which are race, color, religion, gender, disability, familial status, national origin, sexual orientation, or gender identity. After reading the definition of illegal real estate steering, I'm not 100% sure that the previous stated scenario would be an example of illegal real estate steering, because it does seem that this particular scenario would have to have evidence that the steering was related to a protective characteristic outlined. Now, it does raise some concern to me that it could violate a portion of the NAR Code of Ethics. Article 1. When representing a buyer, seller, landlord, tenant, or other client as an agent, realtors pledge themselves to protect and promote the interest of their client. This obligation to the client is primary, but it does not relieve realtors of their obligation to treat all parties honestly. When serving a buyer, seller, landlord, or tenant, or other party in a non-agency capacity, realtors remain obligated to treat all parties honestly. So, as you can see, there may be a little bit of blurriness on this topic at this time as to whether this is unethical or if it's illegal, which while we want to do neither of those things, be an unethical or an operate in an illegal manner, there is obviously a very, very big difference in that. I'll keep you updated on this piece as I learn and unpack this even more. Now, moving to the second part of this issue, which I think could play into why this took off so rapidly, is a possibility that the attempt to push these industry standard compensation, as you see I did it with quotation agreements, could actually be a violation of the antitrust laws. I pulled this excerpt from justice.gov, and quote, under the Sherman Act, agreements among competitors to fix prices or wages, rig bids, allocate customers, workers, or markets are criminal violations. Other agreements such as exclusive contracts that reduce competition may also violate the Sherman Antitrust Act and are subject to civil enforcement. So the part that stands out to me the most in this section is the part that talks about agreements among competitors to fix prices or wages. I think it's this section that could be honed in on a little bit. While agent to agent, we see this as cooperating with each other to get a buyer home and to help a seller sell their house in a timely manner. You can also see how this could be concerning to a seller who may have felt that they were forced to do this because honestly, at the end of the day, it is truly a lot of money out of the seller's pocket. So, if you're still with me, that was an extremely long summary of how and possibly a little bit why we are now experiencing some changes to the industry. What came from this class action lawsuit essentially is that listing brokerages are no longer allowed to list cooperating compensation on MLS platforms. As was previously done, listing agents would pre-negotiate the compensation for a buyer's agent with their seller during usually a listing appointment. From there, once the listing brokerage put that information on MLS, it also was listed on there how much had been pre-negotiated for that buyer's agent, and once the buyer's agent went on to get all the information about this property, they could see it there. So this lawsuit and has gone into effect, at least in our MLS, that there is no longer ability for a buyer's broker to see what the compensation is being offered by the seller. And really what it's going to is saying that sellers no longer are providing compensation for buyers brokers, which is why now it needs to be negotiated in, which is why now on the front end, buyers and buyers agents are talking about this so that there's complete transparency through the entire process. So what do we do? From my perspective, the most significant change seems to be that buyers and buyers agents will negotiate and come to an agreement on what the buyer's agent's compensation will be prior to beginning their agency relationship. To this point, the buyer will be responsible to pay their agent's commission unless it is eventually negotiated to be paid by another party in the transaction. What I deduct from this is that there are now 3 ways that the buyer's broker can be compensated, and that being the buyer to buyer's broker, the seller to buyer's broker, or the seller's brokerage to the buyer's brokerage. This differs in how it has been done in the past, and what I believe most people would agree to say that the seller's broker has been compensating the buyer's broker, essentially, because on the front end, the seller's broker had typically been negotiating the buyer broker's compensation. So this is a major change to how we've typically been doing, but all industries go through major change. So will there be some challenges? Yeah, of course. Will we all figure out how to still transact real estate together again? Yeah, of course, again also. Now, I truly believe that a transaction of any type should be done with the utmost transparency from all parties involved. So I can't say that I hate any of this or that I have any negative feelings towards the sellers who brought about this lawsuit. Actually, I understand. The concern that I have is really just related to home buyer accessibility and affordability. The average American, it's already getting harder and harder to achieve that dream of home ownership. And with the changes that are now in place, this additional cost adds to that barrier of buying your first home. Now, saying that doesn't mean that I think that sellers are the ones that should be responsible for this, and I'm really not exactly sure yet who should be responsible or how we should work this out. That's something I'm working on. I think we're working on, as an industry. I think it is important, though, to continue to work to help people purchase this asset, because if you look at stats, home ownership and owning a home really tends to be one of the largest money-making items that people purchase in America. The equity that's gained over time adds to that wealth significantly for most Americans. Now, I know I've bombarded you with information, starting from the top of how we got here, maybe why we've gotten here, what will change, what to look out for. So I have some final notes here, really mainly for the buyers watching this also. And I want you to know that it's now going to be a mandatory practice that before an agent shows you a home, they're going to need to sign a buyer's broker agreement. Now in the past, people did this here and there, myself included. I always felt that if the buyer didn't want to work with me, I wasn't going to hold them to a contract. So I didn't necessarily have this done all the time just to show them a house. But now it's going to be required. So if you're a buyer and your agent is coming to you and asking you to sign an agreement for X amount of days so that they can show you houses and work for you, represent you, this is going to be a typical market standard now. So don't look at this agent and think they're weird or crazy for asking you to do this now. This is going to be what is needed and required. And to that point, now in these documentations, it needs to be agreed upon what type of compensation that your agent is going to be making. So I think this all the more shows that you need to make sure you're using an agent that you truly trust and you truly has value for you. It's not just someone to open a house for you, show you the house. If I'm being honest, that's the least involved part of being a real estate agent, especially on the buyer side, is opening houses. But things like Zillow, Redfin, things like that, now you can find the houses yourself. It's knowing how to navigate that, getting with the right lender, the right title company, looking for things on site, doing inspections, knowing what's reasonable, what's not reasonable when your inspection report comes back. Things like that is really where the value of buyer's agents are going to come in, and making sure that you have someone representing you in this transaction. One thing that went around before that, wasn't the best, but people talked about buyer's agents being quote unquote free to them because it was paid by the sellers. Now it wasn't ever really true, it was just negotiated a different way. But even more so now, when a buyer is really obligated to pay that buyer's agent compensation until otherwise stated, even more now than ever, you have to make sure you have an agent that is working for the best for you and is someone that you trust. Other final notes is, if you are working with an agent, please give them grace as we're navigating this. And to all of us agents, let's have grace with each other in the industry as we navigate this and figure out what's going on. We will get through it. We will figure it out. There will be some type of balance that comes back to this, and we'll figure it out. But everyone, let's just have grace with each other as we navigate this section together. I hope this has been at least a little bit helpful on shining some light on the changes that are happening in the real estate industry. As I find out more about this and continue to learn and grow, I will provide updates with you. So thank you for sticking in and watching this whole thing. I think it's really important for us to stay up to date on what's going on, and I appreciate your time.